No turning back. Isayev's sacrifice gave us 12 seconds. Maybe less. We ran. Not because we wanted to, but because he'd given his life so we could. I could still hear the blast ringing in my skull, the way the earth trembled. Bits of shrapnel thudded against the wreckage behind us. Smoke followed like a curse. We ducked into the sewers, just as planned. The tunnels were worse than I remembered. Rats fled in rivers. The walls sweated, the air reeked of rot and fuel. Every splash of our boots echoed like gunfire. But it was safer than the surface. For now. Mikhailov led, his massive frame somehow nimble in the narrow tunnel. Denisov limped behind him, clutching his ribs. I took rear guard with Sasha. Neither of us spoke. There was nothing left to say. I kept hearing Isayev's voice. Comrade teacher. This is my lesson. ID taught boys like him once. About verbs and poems and history. Never how to die. After 2 hours of trudging, we reached the old waste duct beneath our sector. A narrow access ladder led up to a maintenance hatch. I climbed first, prying the lid open just enough to see daylight and movement. 2 German soldiers. Guarding the depot entrance. 2 guards. Light weapons, I whispered. Denisov groaned. If we don't make it to command in the next hour, the counterattack begins, and they won't see the flank coming. We had one chance. 1. Mikhailov cracked his knuckles. Let me. Before I could argue, he climbed up, knife in hand. What happened next was fast and brutal. A scuffle. A grunt. Then silence. When we climbed out, both Germans lay slumped in the snow, crimson blooming beneath them. Mikhailov was panting, but alive. We entered the depot through the back. Wounded soldiers littered the grounds, bandaged, coughing, too exhausted to stand. A young medic raised a pistol at us before realizing we were Soviets. He pointed us toward command. Inside the bunker, it was chaos. Radios blared static, officers shouted, maps scattered across tables. I stepped in, bloodied, shaking. Lieutenant Morozov, 137th Rifle, I said. Immediate threat, flank assault through the sewers. Confirmed intel. Enemy movement east sector. Must reroute defenses. The room froze. Then a colonel stepped forward. Where's your proof? I handed over Denisov's maps, now smeared with blood. He was captured. Forced to map our positions. Their assault hits in under an hour. The colonel scanned the pages. His jaw tightened. Sound the alert. Reposition 3rd Battalion to Sector 6. Double artillery cover. Now. We'd done it. For the first time in days, I felt something close to hope. We'd stopped the knife aimed at our backs. Maybe Isayev hadn't died for nothing. But war doesn't reward hope. As we stepped outside, the world exploded. A shell, mortar, landed 50 meters from the bunker. The air turned to fire. The ground buckled. I hit the snow, ears ringing. When I opened my eyes, all I could hear was wind. Then Sasha's voice. Teacher. Help. I turned. He was on his knees, cradling Mikhailov's head in his lap. The big man was coughing blood, his chest torn open. I ran, dropped beside him. No, Mikhailov. His eyes found mine. Worth it, he rasped. Tell. My daughter. He never finished. His hand fell limp. Sasha didn't speak. He just rocked back and forth, muttering the Lord's Prayer under his breath. Denisov stood nearby, eyes hollow. We were all ghosts now. But the assault never came. Our warning worked. Our line held. The flank was reinforced. The Germans pulled back, too exposed, too slow. Their maneuver failed before it began. They never knew what hit them. But I didn't feel like we'd won. That night, I sat alone by a crater, watching snow fall over the wreckage. The smell of cordite and blood lingered in the air. Sasha sat beside me eventually, silent. Do you think it ends? He asked. What? The war. The dying. Us. I looked at the ruins around us. Then at him. I don't know. The silence returned. And we let it stay. What we carry. They gave me a medal. Not right away, months later, after the snow melted and the Volga thawed and the rats stopped gnawing at the dead. A red star on a ribbon. I didn't go to the ceremony. Sasha went in my place. Said a few words. Saluted. Smiled for the cameras. But none of it brought Mikhailov back. Or Isaev. Or the boy in the silo. After the failed German push, Stalingrad became a graveyard of steel and bones. Entire battalions disappeared in the frozen mud. We won, yes, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival. Like dragging your soul behind you through every breath. I stayed with the 137th. They needed officers. Men who had seen death and not gone mad. That was the irony, I had gone mad. I just wore it better than most. Sasha changed too. He stopped asking about poems. His hands stopped shaking. He became faster with the rifle, colder with his words. I saw him shoot a surrendering German once. Didn't say a thing. Neither did I. Denisov was reassigned. He left without goodbye, but I heard he made it to Berlin. Promoted. Decorated. I wasn't bitter. He carried his own ghosts. One night in March, Sasha and I were stationed in a gutted church north of the city. Snow leaked through the holes in the roof. We lit a small fire beneath the altar. He took out a pocket watch. Not his own. Mikhailov's. I fixed it, he said. I blinked. Didn't know you knew how. Didn't, he shrugged. Learned. I watched the hands tick forward. Always forward. No hesitation. Do you think they remember us? He asked. The ones who died. I didn't answer right away. They live in our silence, I said. The parts of us we had to kill just to go on. He looked at me, brow furrowed. You still write? He asked. I flinched. It felt like a blow to the chest. I hadn't touched my notebook since that night in the silo. I reached into my coat and pulled it out. Crumpled. Blood-stained. Still closed. I opened it. The pages were mostly blank, except for one, written before the mission. A line from Pushkin, scrawled in haste. And I shall tell of vengeance, not of peace. Sasha read it and nodded slowly. Then he said something I didn't expect. Tell it all, teacher. I looked at him. At the boy who had once asked about books in the middle of a gunfight. Now a man. Hardened. But not broken. Why? Because someone has to remember. Even if it's just words on a page. I wanted to believe him. But I didn't know where to begin. A week later, we were sent to clear a forest outside Kursk. Intelligence said it was abandoned. A lie, of course. We were ambushed. Mortar shells turned trees into spears. I remember the ringing, always the ringing. Sasha went down beside me. Caught in the leg. Screamed once, then went quiet. I dragged him behind a half-buried tractor. Blood soaked his trousers. I wrapped a belt around his thigh. You're not dying here, I growled. He didn't argue. But he didn't look at me either. That night, I sat by him, listening to his shallow breathing. He was unconscious. Feverish. I opened the notebook again. This time, I wrote. Not poems. Confessions. I wrote about Mikhailov's last words. About Isaev's prayer before the blast. About the German boy in the silo whose name I never learned. About the silence. The guilt. The parts of me that had died and refused to stay buried. It poured out like blood from a wound. When Sasha woke in the morning, I showed him the page. He read it without a word. Then nodded once. That's how you win the war, he said. I stared at him. By writing about it? No, he said. By remembering it. So it doesn't win you. The war after. Berlin fell in May. We heard the news on a crackling radio while stationed in a trench outside a village whose name I never learned. There were no cheers, no wild celebrations. Just a long, aching silence. War, it turns out, doesn't end with a bang. It ends with an absence, the absence of orders, of gunfire, of purpose. And then you're left with yourself. That's the real battle. Sasha never regained full use of his leg. They pulled him from the front and sent him to a hospital near Minsk. I visited once. He was sitting in a chair, staring out a window. When I walked in, he didn't turn. Just said. I keep dreaming of the silo. I sat beside him. We didn't speak much. We didn't have to. I told him I was being discharged. Medically, they said, exhaustion. Mentally, I knew it was something else. A doctor gave it a name, shell shock. I called it memory. The Pushkin book stayed in my coat until the day I left uniform behind. I never opened it again. It felt too small now. Like trying to describe a storm with a single raindrop. I returned home to a town that barely remembered me. The school was rubble. My father had died while I was at the front, pneumonia, they said. There was no grave. Just a letter. I found work at a rail yard, fixing engines, greasing machines. My hands shook at first. Then they didn't. The body adapts. The soul pretends. Sometimes I'd hear distant bangs, construction, fireworks, storms, and my heart would seize. Not from fear. From recognition. I saw Sasha once more, years later. He was working in a library in Lviv. Limping, grayer, but still carrying Mikhailov's watch. We sat beneath a tree in the park and spoke like old men. Not of battles, but of absurdities. The goat that stole Sasha's bread. The lieutenant who snored louder than shellfire. We laughed until it hurt. Then, he handed me a small package. Wrapped in paper. Tied with twine. You never published it, he said. Inside was my notebook. The one I thought I'd lost in Kursk. The pages now copied. Typed. Had transcribed every word I wrote. And at the bottom, one line in his handwriting. So it doesn't win you. I didn't cry. Not then. But that night, I opened the notebook by candlelight, and I read it all. Every word. Every name. Every silence. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a soldier. I felt like a man. It's been 2 decades since then. I now teach again. Not literature, history. My students don't ask about the war. Not often. But when they do, I tell them the truth. That heroes are not men who kill. They're the ones who carry the dead inside them and still choose to live. That silence is not peace. It is memory, unspoken. And that every war has 2 endings, the one on the battlefield, and the one in your soul. I see Sasha sometimes. We never talk about the boy in the silo, or Isav's prayer, or Mikhailov's last breath. But I know we remember. Because I still hear the ticking. That quiet, steady rhythm. Forward. Always forward.